Event log transcription 001045, Brigadier General Chandler Worth. 15th August 2998, 0800, unlisted New Vanguard Black Site 2 months later, and we still know next to nothing. The most paramount component of every military operation is intelligence. To even consider fighting an enemy, you need to know and understand them. Their capabilities, their strategies, what drives them, what demoralizes them, how they think, how they eat, how they breathe, how they like their breakfast made in the morning. All of these are factors you can exploit to your advantage, just to tip the scales ever so slightly in your favor on the battlefield. Even before recorded conflict, thousands of years ago, when our ancestors roamed the primordial forests and savannas of old, they knew what they were hunting. They knew how to hunt it, they knew how to track it, and most importantly, they knew how to kill it. These are things they understood long before they even contemplated the hunt. You don't set out to hunt something you know nothing about. That's just common sense. And up until now, no soldier has been sent into a battle without knowing what they were going up against to some degree or another. So you can see our frustration when after 2 months of steady, soul-crushing conflict, we still don't know jack shit about who or even we're up against. Yay! We know what weapons they use, but those very same weapons become useless once in our hands. Sure, we kind of know what they look like, but once killed, the deceased just become a pile of liquid flesh encased in rigid armor. Entire platoons of lifeless masses giving us next to zero information about what they once were. The lengths they go to just to ensure even their anatomy eludes us is astounding. Moreover, our best scientists are still months away from reverse engineering even their most basic systems that we managed to scavenge from the fallen. Locating downed enemy crafts also proved futile, as we would send out search parties to the crash sites, only for them to report back piles of ash and dust in the still scorching craters. Fighting a faceless enemy isn't just a nigh impossible task, it's a terrifying one. Standing across from me now was a captain who, only months prior, I would have called my enemy, and he the same. Our nations, then locked in a bitter Cold War, now worked as one and the same. I guess these things we're fighting saved us in a way. How ironic is that? They stopped us from slaughtering billions just so they could do it themselves. Mere days before their arrival, I was overseeing an entire division on standby in case the Reds made any move in our direction. Their missiles to the south, not 500 miles from my home, and ours even closer to theirs. The world was teetering on the edge of collapse, and we were all one shitty decision away from complete nuclear annihilation. Guess we can thank these things for one thing after all. They gave us a goal, an ultimatum. One we had long forgotten about in our centuries of complacency and comfort. Survive, no matter what it takes, no matter who it takes, and no matter how long it takes. Just fucking survive. So the sheer shock on my face was impossible to conceal when this captain entered my office and gave to me, in my opinion, the most critical information this war had ever seen or might ever see for that matter. I've been known to be a rather difficult one to read, maybe that's why I've gotten so far in this line of work. But even the most stoic of officers would have dropped their stonewall facade at what he was about to tell me. Alive? Da, sir, almost an entire squad, the captain replied, standing at attention before me. Even in times like these, it was impressive and respected when one upheld the customs and courtesies of military traditions. Relax. Take a seat. I wish we had the time to be proper, but time hasn't been our ally these past months. Let's get right into it. When? How? I wasn't even sure what questions to ask him. All the different possibilities flashing through my mind, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't shaking in my seat like a child. I cleared my cluttered desktop and focused all my attention to the captain sitting across from me, my expression betraying my usual composure. He shifted in his seat, he too barely able to contain his own excitement, and steadied himself with a measured breath. About 30 minutes ago, we detected movement of squad-sized element moving in direction of facility. We're unsure how they learned of this location, but we quickly dispatched DCO 1st Platoon on interception course, as is standard procedure for situation like ZIS. We gave instructions to appear as routine scout patrol, so not to seem as if they were departing from facility. They dismounted 1 kilometer out and proceeded on foot. As their lead element neared the ambush site, the enemy movement ceased in a clearing roughly 500 meters to the southwest, an extreme irregularity from their usual operating procedures. I leaned forward in my seat, nodding at the officer to continue. He spilled his words so fast and with excitement that occasionally it was difficult to discern what he was saying due to his thick Eastern accent. But nonetheless, I was impressed with his mastery of our language in such a short time. They radioed to us, and we at headquarters advised them to approach with caution and obtain visual, then in place. However, once they reached edge of clearing, they could tell something was unusual. The enemies were down on knees together, and weapons were not able to be spotted. They assumed it must have been some ploy, a way to bring down guard. But it was interesting because we have no reports of them using tactics such as this before. Platoon leader decided to continue to emplace in Z Woodline to ensure proper security before making any more moves. They asked again how to proceed. After some deliberation, D Company Commander issued order to fire regardless. None of us questioned his decision. Aggression and surprise has served our operations well in the past. It was the best call. Nobody wanted to assume the risk of it being anything more. But platoon leader felt that it was not right. This was too different, too strange. He paused, choosing his words carefully as he spoke. He ordered platoon to stay put and moved forward on his lonesome against direction of company commander. He got closer and one of them stood up, arms raised, and that was when he finally took notice of the strangest thing yet. They were not wearing helmets, sir. We could see them. Reel them. Even though my surprise at his last statement was evident, I stayed quiet, my silence signaling to him to carry on. I was too invested in his story to interrupt him. As much as my mind was begging me to start a full debrief right then and there, I reeled my thoughts back in. He stilled himself and took another deep breath before finishing the report. He decided to tell platoon to hold fire, not to engage unless he said otherwise. Once he realized they were actually surrendering, the EPW team was called forward to restrain them. I personally do not believe the restraints are able to hold them, but I think it made the platoon feel safer about being so close to those things. They are set to arrive back at gate in 5 minutes. Until that point, it was not worth involving you, sir. But once they surrendered, I was instructed to inform you of the situation as quickly as I could, and that your presence is requested at headquarters upon conclusion of this brief. I let the air in the room settle for a moment once he finished. To say I was in shock would not be doing my emotions justice. I decided to withhold my questions until I was able to assess the situation personally at headquarters. But this was absolutely unprecedented. The realization of what just transpired and how I handle this growing situation would have ramifications that could affect the entire war effort. My mind was racing 1,000 thoughts a minute, thinking about everything this will change. I was itching to know just a fraction of the information these POWs could provide us. The intelligence from having live enemies has the potential to change the war as we know it, and that's not even beginning to mention the possibilities if they were actually cooperative. Our goals may evolve from merely surviving 1 more month to potentially taking an offensive. Well, that may be pushing it, but for the first time since this struggle for our right to live began, we may have the means to turn it from a struggle to a real honest-to-God fight. Well then, let's go meet our guests. We departed my office and made our way to the headquarters room that served as the TOC for all operations in this region. A collection of brass from all walks of life populated the command center before me. Some from my original command team who had managed to survive this far, and the rest from various old militaries which had been selected to fill the many vacancies that had opened up since the beginning of the war. Now all of them were ranking officers of the recently formed Unified Global Military Force, coined the New Vanguard. Upon our entry, the room grew quiet. The noise and clatter of 20 different officers and soldiers, all focusing on various tasks, died down. The room itself was in general disarray. It was littered with various all-sporting maps, computers, cluttered papers, and an unhealthy amount of cigarette butts. Covering the main wall opposite the entryway were large displays, which depicted the visual feeds from multiple soldiers currently in transit. The others depicted various security feeds or tactical overlays of the region. Adorning the center of the room was a large-scale map of our AI, projected in 3 dimensions across the table. I approached the table and magnified the display to the AO around redacted and saw the green and red markers of a friendly platoon-size element, moving in conjunction with an enemy element. "Gents," I announced, casually addressing the room, "carry on. Sergeant, throw up the visual feed from their platoon SART, full screen. I assume he's accompanying our guests?" I directed. What better way to get answers than to see for yourself? "Correct, sir. Sending it up now, sir." The communications sergeant to my left replied while clicking away at his keyboard. The room, having filled with life once more, now focused their attention on the display as well. I watched the screen intently as it shifted from multiple inputs to isolating a singular visual feed from one of the soldiers. The platoon sergeant was in the back of a transport vehicle, his rifle pointed towards the 8 captives in the back of a covered truck. His finger hovered over the trigger, ready to make a move at a moment's notice. The captives themselves still yielded little information to me. Their heads were donned with a sandbag hastily secured with a pair of goggles on the outside. For POWs, they were incredibly calm. Their motionless demeanor was ominous in the green-filtered display, while our soldiers in the back of the truck looked nervous to no end. The ping requesting entry to the main gate sounded off across the room. I gave a nod of approval, and the airlock of gates were opened for our returning convoy. I looked over to the commander of D Company, who was on the radio with what I assumed was the PL. "Tell Platoon Sergeant to isolate the one who stood out in the field. Separate him from the rest, and have him sent to one of the interrogation rooms. The rest of them to the block. None of them are to be in a room together, understood?" "Of course, sir. Hailing him on the radio now. Captain Arkhipov." Turning to the officer who had briefed me earlier, "Cease all other tasks and gather the rest of the intelligence team, along with the translation contractors, and meet me in the interrogation block. You got 10 minutes. Major Maisley find Dr. Fraser and have her meet us there as well. Let's get this rolling, gents. No time to waste. The rest of you continue defensive operations as normal. Notify me of any significant developments, along with any and all movement detections within a 100-mile radius. I'll be damned if anything tries to interrupt us today." With that, I walked out of the room, hearing everyone rush to get their tasks done behind me. Taking advantage of the momentary lapse in responsibility, I decided to scrounge up my morning coffee. Even though my heart was already racing with the chemicals of excitement, and I probably didn't need it, I still like to have a semblance of routine. It helped ease the mind in uneasy times. I made my way towards the wing of the facility responsible for securing high-risk prisoners. It had seen so little utilization as of late that last week I was considering having it repurposed to additional storage and maybe even a theater. The Joes tended to get bored when cramped up hundreds of meters inside a mountain for weeks on end. They probably would have liked that. Though now I was glad I tabled that decision. I made my way down to the interrogation room with time to spare, and already saw Dr. Fraser working alongside the signal team, throwing together the components to an unusually large computer system. Multiple towers stood almost floor to ceiling, filling the room. Somehow they found a way to make being underground even more claustrophobic than it already was. "And you're taking up all of this space for translation software," hastily answered a young doctor, who appeared as if she thought grooming standards and personal upkeep were merely suggestions. The programs we've created over the last month require almost 100 megabytes of memory to run. Wild, right? So we need all these to run the program. And thankfully, to our friends across the pond for sharing, we've created a computer based off their Atlas computer. Still working on a name for it. I'm thinking of something more impressive like Overlord or Titan. But anyway, I think we'll finally be able to seamlessly run the program. I let out a sigh, allowing the doctor to finish her monologue before asking again. So we're using untested software, great. How does it work, doctor? I tried to stop myself once I realized I was asking her another question, but I had failed. Oh gosh, I can go on and on about the details of it all day long if we had the time. No thanks, just give me a quick rundown. I'll do my best. It's so difficult to put a masterpiece of computer engineering into such few words. Basically, you know how it's taken me and the signal and translation teams months to decipher even the basic parts of their language? And mind you, that's with the help and data from the hundreds of other teams across the globe. Where we stand now, we can grasp basic words and phrases from their intercepted transmissions, but those are few and far in between. My personal theory is that they're using a different form of communication that doesn't fall within the electromagnetic spectrum, which would explain why we pick up so few transmissions. Off topic, doctor, reel it back in. The program? Right. So we've compiled every single transmission we've intercepted, along with all words we think we understand, into a singular program. Along with that, we've dictated their vocals into something readable on our end. If it runs correctly, we should be able to input whatever text we want in our language. It'll run through the program and produce the closest recreation it can into something understandable in their language in an audio format, as well as translate anything they say into text on our end. By the time she had finished her explanation, the rest of the requested personnel had filed into the cramped room. Some standing shoulder to shoulder in an attempt not to knock over the large computer components. I made my way over to the desk underneath a large one-way window to witness our reason for being here being led into the room. The soldier escorting the creature secured its restraints to the table and chair before stepping back, keeping his sidearm trained on it at all times. Doctor, get the software running. Whatever it says, relay to me through the intercom. Go ahead and start recording. You're going in there, sir? Are you sure you do not want one of my team to go instead? Captain Arkhipov inquired, seeming nervous at the prospect of the commanding general taking part in the interrogation personally. Hey, I've always been a more hands-on kind of guy. I've been watching this whole war from the back way too long. I'm not wasting my opportunity for some alone time with one of these things. The wide array of conflicting emotions I had walking into the room was difficult to describe. I was scared, sure, who wouldn't be? Being face-to-face with one of the monsters that took part in destroying everything I knew, everyone I knew, it was hard not to feel some fear. The anger was the more prevalent thing I felt within me. Maybe this one personally had killed some of my friends during the course of the war. But above all, I felt thrilled to finally get some answers. I've always been curious to the point that at times it could have gotten me killed. But it wasn't going to kill me today. Probably. Dismissed, Sergeant, I said as I entered. Sir, I'm the protection detail. Dismissed, Sergeant. Get some chow, maybe a drink. He gave a quick salute before leaving through the other door and locking it behind him. I had been imagining what our tormentors looked like from the day of their arrival, but the thing before me looked like it had crawled out of a child's nightmares and manifested itself in the room. I took the seat opposite the pale creature, and we stared at each other for a few seconds. I couldn't even begin to attempt to read the expression on its face, nor its body language. But it looked relatively calm, relieved even. Good to go, General, on you, sounded the voice of Dr. Fraser over the intercom. Well, guess we'll go right to the question we've been asking ourselves from day one. Who are you? There was a brief pause before a robotic voice filled the room with an unusual string of syllables. It wasn't too different from our speech patterns, and if I tried, I could maybe replicate it with enough practice. After a few seconds again, I heard the translated reply come through the intercom. The creature's reply was curt and devoid of detail. However, its mannerisms, its voice, and its piercing gaze stimulated a deep-rooted fear response from a primordial depth within my very core, causing the fur on my spine to stand on end. "My name is Lieutenant Sates, and we call ourselves humans.